Greetings, everyone. It's fantastic to join all of you today. I'm so excited to have the panelists who are joining me today for, as we're calling, a fireside chat. I'll give you a little bit of an understanding of what that is. I will also make sure I introduce myself. But I do want to start by thanking our UKRI colleagues who've been tirelessly working alongside of the AAAS colleagues to come together to set up a series of joint chats. This is the first of two. I will have some more detail about the second one later on. But we wanted to try to do something a bit different. We wanted to inspire, we wanted to excite, we also wanted to challenge all of us in our thinking, in our development, in our creation around catalyzing change and really taking the time and the care, that really important word of the care, to think about how do we do this work? What's the costs of doing this work? What's the pressures and the motivations? But also what's the brilliant joy and the transformative potential of catalyzing change? So sit back. Join us today for what I'm sure will be a rapid number of minutes as we move through. But as I said, we're really excited to welcome you to this space. And I hope this format virtually of being able to engage will give us a chance to really talk to and with each other in a way that isn't just about checklists or key performance indicators or action plans or various other things that I'm sure many of you create and design maybe in your own organizations or you're motivated in terms of moving forward. Those are all brilliant things, but today we really want to have a kind of deep conversation. And as I said, I'm delighted to be joined today by two fantastic people. But before I jump to the two of them, I'm just going to briefly tell you about myself. I'm Dr. Karen Salt. I am currently Deputy Director of R&D Culture and Environment within largest public funder of research and innovation in the UK, which is called UKRI, the UK Research and Innovation. But I did not start my and began all of my life in UKRI. Before that, I've got close to about 30 years experience working in and with communities, leading large research centers, working with various different cultural organizations and community groups, and thinking a lot about governance and transformative change. I've had the pleasure of doing this work in various different ways, from policy work to research projects and grants. And I've joined the organization with and have the joy of working with a whole range of teams that work on research culture, all the way through to equality, diversity, inclusion, research integrity, and what we call open research, which includes aspects of open access. The portfolio also includes some work around mitigating and managing threats and risks to international collaborations. But I am delighted to continue the work that I've always done, which is collaborating and engaging with brilliant, interesting, really vitally important, sometimes shy, sometimes the bold walkers in the room and the co-conspirators around the corner. I'm excited to continue that kind of work within UKRI and to model some of that with this particular panel and the people that we've brought together. So briefly, to give you a sense of who you're going to listen to today, we have got Professor Iyiola Solanke, who is currently Dean for EDI at the University of Leeds and Professor of European Union Law and Social Justice at the University of Leeds Law School, but who will be imminently moving over to the University of Oxford. And I'm immensely pleased around her appointment, and I will ask her to say a little bit about that in due course. Iyiola is the author of Iyiola, a Cambridge University Press publication that came out or is due to come out in 2022, as well as a whole host of other peer-reviewed articles. She founded the Black Female Professors Forum, which promotes the visibility and progress of Black women in academia, and also chaired the Living While Black University Commission, and is also leading 2 research projects. One that is looking into the impact of COVID-19 on practices for well-being and resilience in Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities, and another on promoting access to postgraduate research among women from ethnically diverse backgrounds. So greetings and welcome, Professor Solanke. We also have Dr. Yvette Pearson, who is Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of Texas at Dallas. Dr. Pearson is a fellow of the American Society of Civil Engineers and is recognized globally for her contribution over 25 years to engineering education, particularly in advancing sustainability, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Her efforts have led to over $30 million in funding for initiatives to support what is called DEI, typically in the US, in STEM, and changes to policies and practices of global engineering organizations. She's got a whole host of different awards and recognitions, but is also a registered professional engineer, a commissioner on ABET's Engineering Accreditation Commission, and hosts the Engineering Change podcast, which has audiences in over 70 countries on 6 continents. So I am in good company to have a chat today. I think my organizers have told me before they let us loose to engage and converse with each other, that they've got a short video to show all of you. This video is called Picture a Scientist, and it chronicles the groundswell of researchers who are writing a new chapter for female scientists. It's got a biologist, Nancy Hopkins, a chemist, Rachel Burks, and a geologist, Jane Willenbring. They will take viewers on a journey into their own experiences in the sciences, ranging from various forms of challenges that they've experienced, from harassment to various slights, but along the way, the things that they have encountered and the groups of people that they've engaged with who provide new perspectives on how to make science itself more diverse, equitable, and open to all. So I'm going to go to the team to run the short film.
This genetics, this molecular biology, that was the answer to all the questions I'd ever had about everything. We were just trying to be scientists. We certainly didn't want to be seen as troublemakers.
People said, what happens in the field stays in the field.
It was bullying from day one. He would tell me women were altering the science on the ice for worse.
What's going to happen if I report him? What happens if I don't report him? It was getting really physical.
I didn't tell anybody because who's going to believe you? You know, nobody.
Women are extraordinarily underrepresented in science.
When you ask somebody, draw a picture of a scientist, it used to be all men.
There's a playbook, and it was written by men. And I always felt I didn't have the playbook. You know, I'm just feeling my way through this game.
You get used to being underestimated. You get used to being invisible.
These are great scientists. How can they not believe this?
Many of the women that I've spoken to have left.
This is the leaky pipeline.
They cannot say the evidence doesn't exist.
So I thought, okay, I have to show them it's true. So I wrote, there's a kind of systemic and invisible discrimination against women. Can we really afford to lose those top scientists?
He just needs to look at the data. That's what he'd want us to do for his science.
You cannot do everything on your own. You need enough of your allies to make something happen.
I expected to fight alone. I didn't expect anybody else to fight with me.
Together, we can do better.
Let's move away from a culture of compliance and towards a culture of change.
If you don't have women, you've lost half the best people. Look at the talent of these women. This is worth fighting for.
I think that is now over to us. Thank you for that snippet. And I know that there will be links for you to be able to follow more of that in the future. And as I had mentioned before, I am extremely thankful to be joined by two brilliant folks. What we're going to do is have a conversation that just sort of flows and ebbs quite naturally. I'm going to ask some questions to both of you. And also, I think at the same time, continue to, I think, try to learn and share with each other as we're moving forward. I just want everyone who has tuned in, who has joined us, to know just a couple of things. I think the first one is we don't have the magic answers. So I just want those of you who are grappling with things and who are struggling or who are excited and who are joyful, doesn't matter which part of those perspectives that you're coming from, there's no sort of situation where you should lay all your questions at the feet of some sort of sages who will then tell you exactly what you need to go and do, and you should go off and do it. What we're hopeful to do today, I think, is share some of our experiences, share some of our knowledge, but I also think share some of our learnings, and also maybe the things that we have not cracked or solved at all. The ones that keep us up at night and the ones that worry us. Because as I said before, we're all in this together in terms of thinking about catalyzing change and moving forward. Now, if I could just ask Mark, I'm tiny on my screen. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be tiny on my screen or if you want us to be big. But I just wanted to just alert you to that. But I'm going to crack on, and I have two questions that I'm going to start us off with. And I'm going to start first with to ask this of Iyiola, but then Yvette, I'd like for you to come in. And then I'm going to have a follow-up question on the back of that. That's the plan. But I suspect what's going to happen is that the two of you are going to take us into amazing territory, and then we're going to all get inquisitive, and we'll keep probing and thinking, I think, together across all of these. So Iyiola, you're first up, okay? Now, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I know you have been thinking about this a lot because for the audience, I've had the pleasure. Sometimes it feels like 10 years, but I know it's not been that long, of sitting alongside Professor Solanke and actually talking. We started talking a number of months ago, years now, and we continue to talk weekly as we've been really trying to learn from and grapple with a whole range of issues, think about the world around us, but really start to think about root causes, really starting to think about transformative change and sustaining that. And also starting to think about how do we change the language around this sort of catalyzing change so that joy is a part of that, as opposed to thinking only about sorrow or challenges or problems, so that everything becomes a problem. And we've been very fortunate to have conversations around what we've been calling foundations in various different formats. I know that you've been thinking about this, but I'm going to put you on the spot a bit to share some of that thinking with Yvette and others. And part of it, I think, is going to be this question that I've got around, what does it mean to strategically do this work? I'm always, grappling with the fact that people want the answers. They're thinking about those outcomes and outputs and the change they want to see in the world. They're thinking all the way at that sort of end place, and that powerful, absolutely powerful and important. But what does it mean to strategically do this work day in and day out? Should we be talking more about the mental health and resiliency? Should we be talking about fatigue around catalyzing change? And I want to just ask you, what does it demand from us to be able to do this? And maybe, do we need to do some of that work differently in terms of the way we support each other moving forward? So what insights do you have to share?
Thank you, Karen, and thank you to UKRI and AAAS for inviting me to be part of this roundtable. I'm really pleased to be here, even though I think it's going to be a fantastic and interesting conversation. I'm here to listen and learn as much as to share any insights that I might have. And thank you, Karen, for starting us off with that big question. I mean,
I like big ones, you know that.
It's almost impossible to answer, but as you said, we've been having conversations about this for a couple of years now, all online without ever having met in person. And I think we've been able to have fairly constructive, very constructive conversations because we share this desire to rediscover joy in research and to really ensure that there's care in research. And we've experienced some of the challenges when there isn't joy and when there isn't care. And we both are very, very keen not to just rush to answers, to rush to solutions, but to really work through from the grounds up, from the foundations, to identify what the real challenges are. So not to use the language that already exists, but to really start to question some of the terminology that we use. And one of the things I think that is required in order to do this work effectively is just to be able to admit that you don't have the answer, and to be able to have conversations without having a clearly defined outcome or goal. So the conversations themselves become explorations. And I remember some of our meetings begin and end with us just talking. But by the time we get to the end of our 1 hour conversation, we've actually arrived somewhere that we think is quite fruitful. So one of the things you need to do this work is time. And, you know, we're both in good jobs, so we have that time. We can take that time. But one thing we've been trying to do is think about how can we strategically ensure that those who do want to participate in such conversations can also have that time. And that's a real challenge because organizations, institutions have different priorities. So time is one of the things that we need. It's essential, I think, to do in this type of work. Another thing that I think is essential is just having that courage, as we are doing now, to have these open, informal chats, because without being able to talk about the change that we want to see, it will never come around. So those are just two things that I think are essential. Resilience is important. You mentioned resilience is definitely key to being able to have these conversations, because you know, we need to be able to bring others along. It's not just all about talk. We want the talk is for a purpose, and the purpose is change, but the talk is the catalyst to that change. It's not the catalyst isn't really the outcome. The catalyst is the process. And that process can be very challenging, but also very rewarding. So I'll stop there. I'm sure Yvette has some amazing things to add to that, but I won't say any more for now.
I'm going to hold you to coming back, because I think you've hit upon two things, well, three that I'd like for us to circle back around to once we've got Yvette's response. And I think one was time, one was process. And I really like the way you've helped us start to have this conversation about talk. You know, what is talking? I hear people say this sometimes in a very pejorative sense, that's a lot of talk, or there's talking. And I think there's sometimes they're talking about words, but they're not necessarily talking about talking. And the type of power of actually having those sorts of courageous conversations that you were just describing. So I'll just hold that thought. We'll circle back. Yvette, what's your thinking around this?
I know I want to go ahead on a whole nother set of talking points now, because I've just had so many things churning just listening to Iyiola. So thank you, UKRI and AAAS, for having me here as a part of this panel. You know, one thing that I was happy to read in the context of the invitation I received, and also hearing your introduction, Karen, is first of all, looking at root causes, and then also joy. I find that in this work, in a lot of spaces I'm in, so many people approach this work from a point of anger. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot for us to be angry about. But what I find is that we can be more effective if we don't come swinging out with the bats all the time. Sometimes we need to. So, but a lot of times there's a disconnect and people need to have a conversation. So in addition to the talking, what I want to do also is, when we circle back to that topic, is talk about the listening part of the conversation, because I think that's something that's lacking. And regarding just kind of this whole framing of catalyzing change and what it takes, I think one of the things I find, especially being a Black disabled woman who's also an engineer and a mother and so many other things, is that I have to really have clearly defined walls to separate myself from my work sometimes, because it does get to be very personal when you're working to overcome challenges and opposition that directly impact you or your identities. And a lot of us who are from traditionally marginalized identities are the ones who are laborers in this field. So we have to almost put up some walls sometimes. The personal part of it helps us, I think, be a bit more effective and come at it from a, I'm in this is my experience type point of view. But there's still so much minimalization and marginalization that still goes on, that you just almost have to protect yourself from it as you do the work to overcome those things. And then going back to the time conversation, it does take a lot of time and effort. And what I'd also like to add is timing. There are always people who think that you're moving too quickly. There are always people who think you're moving too slowly. And one thing that I try to do in my work is try to find that balance. I think there are things that are those highly visible, quote unquote, quick wins that shows people up front, yeah, things are going on. But to achieve that long-term sustainable change, it takes time. And it takes time to get to understand what those root causes are. So we're not just throwing things against the wall to see what will stick, but we're being very intentional in taking those deeper dives so that our strategies are addressing those root causes and working on those things. And like I said, that occurs over time. As that time occurs, though, I think the communication about what's going on behind the scenes is very important. So keeping lines of communication open, again, not just sharing or conveying information, but also being receptive to information. What are we hearing? What are we receiving? What are we pulling out of people about their experiences? And the last part I'll add to that is, I know our university just recently did a climate survey. There hadn't been one in a few years. And like a lot of universities, I'll just be upfront, not a lot have been done since the last one. So we wanted to be very intentional to say we wanted a survey that's going to inform what's next. And so a very critical part of that for us was to make sure that we're not so lost in the numbers that we don't hear the voices that don't show up in the numbers. And so that's where that root cause and getting to what those very rich comments say, what we might have to do with follow-up with focus groups to get the voices and understand what's going on. So I will pause there.
No, I think this is brilliant. And I think it really chimes, I think, with what Iyola's already started us off thinking about. And I'm going to, I think, circle back to, I think, the point that I think you just raised, Yvette, around anger. And it's not necessarily to talk about anger being a bad tool or a critical concern, but it's something about, I think, we talk a lot about the deficit model within equality and diversity inclusion or DEI work. And that idea for those listening, where there is something that an individual or a group or population lacks, and so you're therefore needing to put that thing into place. This group of people need certain sets of skills, and then the magic will happen. These sorts of people will need a mentor, and then the magic will happen. This sort of thing will transform our systems if we do this. And so it's thinking about individuals lack something, right, in terms of this deficit. And there's something about, I think, this anger model that, while I don't think necessarily that it's a bad tool, it is a trap. If you live in that sort of emotional churn in terms of everything that you do, it's very hard to then actually dance, right? Like to dance and to find that joy and that wellspring of the things that make you excited again, that continue to inspire you. So I know you were talking about swinging a bat, but I think there's also something about what does it cost to maintain that sort of that anger? What does that feel like? Because we do know from good studies about what it does to people's bodies to be in that kind of heightened state. And from a high blood pressure all the way through to other sets of issues and concerns. And but I think I'd like to go back to your walls you were talking about trying to create these walls almost as sort of protection moving forward. And I guess my question to both of you is, what and how do we need to think of the skills of doing this work for catalyzing change? That idea of getting into root causes or sustained activity that doesn't just depend on a magic person to somehow magically solve an organization or to put up a plan. How do we actually turn this into that sort of sustained long term? Because some people will go, it's policies. If we just create more policies and get those policies sorted, we will magically transform it. Others will say we need to include X bodies. If we just had people from X background in positions of power or wherever it might be, we will again solve the situation around sorts of systems. But this seems to have a cost attached to it. If people keep the walls up, right? If they need the timing right, help me unpack this, because this seems to be a difficulty when we're starting to talk about who's laboring where and the work that they're doing. Either of you, who would like to come in first?
I'll come in if you don't mind. So I want to come back to the point of anger. I remember a few years ago I organized a conference on the 50th anniversary of the first Race Relations Act that was adopted in the United Kingdom, and it was at the British Academy. And we had this wonderful room, and on the wall was a picture that just said anger. And I thought, oh, this is very interesting. That's something that we as people who are concerned with race and racial discrimination are often accused of being very angry. But actually, there wasn't very much anger in the room at all, but there it was on the wall. And so I thought about, how anger can be used constructively. I think that's the point I want to make. It certainly can be used constructively, but I think where it starts to become a hindrance in catalyzing change is that anger can prevent us from entering into relationship, and anger can prevent us from trusting. And I think that at the start, I think the origin of every policy is a relationship of trust. And without that relationship of trust, then the conversation cannot happen. Without that relationship of trust, it's impossible to step out of comfort zones and just talk, and have conversations that lead to somewhere different. So that anger, those boundaries can be, in the long term, can be disruptive of the openness that is required to generate and catalyze change. And trust is important. We need to be able to trust the persons that we're having conversations with, because those are the persons that we're going to then develop new ideas with that will be transferred into new policies. But it all starts with a conversation. and with the courage to have that conversation. So that's all I wanted to say for now. I'll hand over to you, Yvette.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And you're exactly right. You know, there's a lot of stuff that wouldn't get done if someone didn't get angry about it, but it's the way that you approach it. And that's what I meant with, you can't always come out swinging with the bats, because sometimes it takes a conversation, and because someone just doesn't see it or doesn't understand it in the same way. So I love that. The relationship part is so critical. Regarding the part about you know, the walls and getting people involved. One of the biggest reasons why I believe we have not seen large scale sustainable change. And I often give a talk where I point out 3 of the major reasons why I believe quote unquote diversity efforts have failed us. And one of those reasons is what I call being relegated and delegated. So relegated to the margins of what we do, as opposed to being really ingrained, intertwined into the work we do, whether it's in STEM or law or whatever other area of policy, and then delegated to those of us who are from the traditionally marginalized identities. And so with regard to now, how do we change that? My approach has been information. So when I can take an example to a group of engineers and show them how this shows up in their work as engineers, it sometimes clicks off a light bulb. For some people that doesn't work. I literally had a conversation 2 weeks ago where I cited data. I gave very specific examples, and the person stood there flat-footed and told me, yeah, I heard all your examples, but nothing you say is going to change my mind. Well, there's not much I can do to help you. And that's where, Karen, what you said earlier, that's where we go to start. We've got to change behaviors. And so that's where the changing policies and practices comes in, because some people, we won't change their minds, but we have to be able to change the behaviors. And then again, you know, being able to pull together groups. I know through our involvement as a university in AAAS's Sea Change initiative, and I've only been at UT Dallas since August, but in that time, we've been able to identify what I'll call change agents throughout our university, who now are the people who are the hands on deck. They're the people who help to communicate stakeholder agency in this work, so that it's not something that just lives in my office. It's something that every single one of us, whether we're faculty, staff, or students, whether it's engineering, policy, or music, everybody has some form of agency in it. And it takes having a committed group of folks, as well as leadership. Our president has been at the forefront of leadership. In fact, when we joined Sea Change, and I see Travis is putting the link there in the chat, when we joined Sea Change, our president did our message. I didn't do it because you have to have the commitment of the leadership, and then you also have to have the commitment of the folks who we would consider more grassroots, because it's got to be top down and bottom up. It can't just be in these silos.
Yeah, and I really liked what you're saying about the change makers and the networks and the links. I think someone else was putting in a chat about implementing policies. I love policies. Everyone knows I'm a governance person. So for me, I literally usually ask the questions about, you know, if we are going to be transforming our systems and our spaces, how do we want to govern them? You know, what does that actually look like? What does a powerful, ethical governance structure look like, where there is reciprocity and equality built into the fabric of how it's set up and designed? Not just you go and create a policy on random topic X, and then you just hope that the system sort of works it out at some point in terms of figuring out how to move forward. So I'm all about the questions of policies, but I think there's something about reminding ourselves about relations, how powerful and important relations are across all of these. Policies don't exist in a vacuum. Structures exist because of relations and relationships, either on an individual basis or across institutional basis. and what lives at the core of all of that. So if you've got a fabulous policy, a great month or a day that you're celebrating, but people are still made to feel like they don't belong when they walk in a building or when they walk on a campus, I'm not too sure that anybody's living that policy, right? And that lived kind of way. But so I'm gonna turn back to the listening. I think that you wanted us to talk about briefly, and then I've got to get us to our next question, Yvette, because I think there's something powerful about that exchange that you were just describing. Can you just play it out for us about what does that listening feel like to you? What does it mean to do it yourself? What does it mean to ultimately engage with others, like the person you were just describing, who you felt may not have been listening to you when you were having your last conversation?
Yeah, so it's listening on that side, because I was very intentional in listening to that person's perspectives to try to, one of the things that we have to be able to do with regards to leading change is to understand the resistance that people have. Because sometimes there are just things that folks don't understand, they're not aware of, and it can be worked out. Sometimes that there's just a lack of willingness, and that's something that can't so much be worked out. That's a personal issue. So that's a part of the listening. And then another part of the listening, and I see someone has put in the Q&A about the data. And I think a lot of times, especially in the science and engineering space, when we think about data, we think about numbers. And then the person's comment in the question and answer says, why do we focus so much on data and not so much on the suffering that's happening in the meantime while initiatives are ongoing? When I think about data, I'm thinking about the listening part. I'm thinking about connecting with people, hearing from them firsthand what is going on, so that then we can focus our strategies on addressing what's been identified as a problem. So it's not necessarily just looking at some numbers, although I think climate surveys and things like that, what we see in success rates and all of those things when we're looking at different populations, I think that's very important. But a key part of data, as I see it, is getting in the trenches with everybody in the community at every level. There's no big I and little you, and hearing those stories and getting their input on, well, how do you see, what do you see as the need? What do you see as a possible solution? And we can start there with exploring the fixes.
I mean, I won't speak for Iyiola, but I think she and I feel data is really big. Data is this beautiful big space that has art and drama and music and movement and dance and stats in it. It does, but it has all of that brilliance.
And poetry and theater and everything. I mean, I just love everything you've just said, Yvette, and I really want to come back to the power of the narrative and the power in just hearing somebody tell their story. Now, of course, we have to remember that story is somebody's pain, might be somebody's trauma, but the impact on the listener when we tell our stories directly can be so much more transformative than the data arising from a survey conducted over 2 or 3 months. That directness of hearing about the experience of somebody who is actually in the same space as you can be so powerful. And I've heard that from my colleagues here at Leeds, and that's one thing that we're definitely trying to do more of here in Leeds as we prepare to enter things such as the Race Equality Charter. We want people to understand with their hearts as well as their heads. So
sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm getting warning signs that we need to move forward. And I wanted to.
Can I just say one more thing on leadership? Because I wanted to come back to Karen's point on leadership. Courage.
I was going to ask you about courage.
Okay, I'll tie those in. So I think we're very lucky at the University of Leeds because we have a new Vice Chancellor. Yvette, you mentioned your president. We have a new Vice Chancellor who is very courageous in the equality, diversity and inclusion space. And one of the key parts of her arrival here has been to ensure that that moves from being at the margins to being at the center of everything that we do. So, you know, as was mentioned in the video, moving away from a culture of compliance and thinking of EDI or DEI as compliance driven, and really trying to make it at the heart of the change that we want to see. And that does take courage. And I think one of the great things that we're seeing here in the United Kingdom is that many vice chancellors are now seeing the value in doing that. And as you said, Yvette, that has to come from the top. That cannot start from the bottom. The grassroots, the faculty, the students play a crucial part in living that and making sure that it does actually become a reality in the institution. But without that clear, unconditional, unequivocal leadership at the top, any effort lower down can always be thwarted precisely by those people you mentioned, Yvette, who are just not interested and just do not want to change at all. So the courage has to, I suppose, be on all parts. But the courage of the leadership is crucial.
Really powerful. Thank you both for this. And I will be remiss if I didn't drop one more thing about policies. Anyone who knows me will know that I normally talk about policies and squirrels, and they are connected. And just for the audience to know, policies are fantastic, but they often are created by squirrels who are picking up the nuts and put the nuts down. And then over time, a beautiful tree grows. And eventually there is a forest. And as you start to try to navigate the world around whatever topic, you keep hitting all these trees. Sometimes not quite sure why those trees are there. No one knows. No one owns them. When you try to find the owner of that tree doesn't exist as an owner. When you try to make the tree go away, everyone says, no, we can't, because that's how it's always been done. So we've got some issues around policies in the sense of we've got to stop necessarily trying to just create more of them for the sake of it. We do have to get underneath why we have them and what they're supposed to do. And we can't necessarily put so much on the implementation of them that we forget the relational aspects, both between them and people. So that's Absolutely. Just Karen's policy problematic and the squirrel metaphor. And hopefully you will go propagate that to others. We've got some fabulous questions that have come in from others. And again, I just want to caveat to the two of you that I'm not expecting you to have all the answers to all of this, but I think it would be great for you to share your perspectives and your experiences. The first one that we've got, sorry, before I do go off, fabulous. I enjoyed this fireside chat greatly. We could have kept going even longer because there's so much wisdom and power, and I think people coming together to share their truths as they know them. So thank you both for your willingness. Our first question says, different research and innovation organizations have different or similar aims and approaches, even to things like culture change. When you partner or you engage and interact with them, how do you find common ground? What perspectives do you have? And I think Iyiola, quite a few of your projects, including CoPower, would be really powerful as an example here, but who would like to take this one first?
I'm happy to, if Yvette doesn't mind.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I think the interesting thing to do when thinking about partnering is to actually perhaps not start with a project, but to just start with having that conversation. So both of the projects that Karen mentioned, the CoPower project and the Generation Delta project, arose because of the women who were connected through the Black Female Professors Forum. The Black Female Professors Forum was something that I started to create just because I was curious. You know, I was promoted to professor and I wanted to know where the other Black female professors were in the United Kingdom, because there was just a lack of visibility apart from the few that I knew. I could read in official data that there were apparently hundreds and hundreds of us, but I didn't know where they were. So I just asked the question, and eventually I had a list of 70, and then it grew to 100, and it continues to grow as women are promoted into the role of professor. Black women are promoted. So there was this network that existed, that came into existence without any other purpose other than getting to know each other. So that was already there as a basis to start these projects. And both projects run across multiple universities. CoPower has 9 universities. Generation Delta has 6 universities. And that really has been the way in which we came together, was just to start talking, just for the sake of talking, just for the sake of getting to know each other. So I would say that's the way to start in partnering with any person, any institution, any organization. Get to know each other, and then you will find the commonalities. And if there are no commonalities, then you know you shouldn't be working together. That saves you a lot of pain and trouble.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Now, even if there are commonalities, that doesn't mean there won't be any pain or trouble.
Yeah. Exactly. You might still have the pain. Without a doubt.
But at least you'll have something else to focus on other than that pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While you think about your structures and what sort of system and governance you know, how do you want to relate with each other, right? In terms of building that moving forward. But I think what you've noted about, you know, why you're having that partnership, why are you collaborating, being really important. And I, before just turning to Yvette for thoughts, people who are motivated by grants or project or funding to form partnerships will struggle if they can't find that common ground outside of those motivations, right? If the motivation is transactional, you've got a lot to unpack to try to get to where that common ground is outside of the transaction of the funding pots. But what's your thoughts, Yvette?
Exactly, and I can show you, I'm going to share one example of a project that has gone very well because of that great partnership, and one that has not gone very well. And it's just what you said, Iyiola, it's important to not start with the project. In one particular case, and as Karen said, motivated by a funding opportunity, there was a project that was presented to me that I ultimately ended up, picking my words here, having to lead. But the project was presented to me, the partners were presented to me, and it was like, here, make this work. And so while everybody said they were all committed to the same things, it didn't bear out in the way that it actually was executed, in the way, you know, people executed. And so certainly it definitely was a major struggle. And even when trying to pull everybody on the same page, it was sort of this, you know, no fault sort of mentality, like, okay, you know, whenever there's something that's not going right, it's nobody's fault. It's you know, nobody can own mistakes, so we can't fix them. And so those are the sorts of things. On the other hand, when there was a funding opportunity that prompted it, but it was very early, and I was able to say, I want to work with these partners, and the partners are across different institutional and organizational structures. And the first meeting after introductions, it was like, what are you interested in? What do you need out of this for this to be of value to you? And when you start with that as the focus and build everything around it, and then ask the question, who else needs to be at the table? Who else needs to be here? Who needs to be a part of this? Then that's when you can really start with that really collective effort where everybody, it's a mutually beneficial arrangement where everybody's getting what they need out of it. And then when people know that they are a part of that and they have what we call skin in the game, then people are going to pour into it. So it's not one person that's kicking out all the energy to make things happen. It's everybody has ownership and agency. So we're all going to be equally invested in it.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
think
when the
that's
magic happens.
that is
Yeah.
when the
Yes.
magic happens. And I mean, we could
Yes.
talk about creating theories of change together, this type of thing, and even
Absolutely.
starting to kind of build underneath assumptions and presumptions that have brought people together, or misinformation that people might have about different sets of entities. But I think that's really powerful, both of you.
Yep.
The one thing I would add to the conversation would be how much this takes work. It takes work through a life of a particular project, but it also takes work just through the lives of the people involved as they ebb and flow and things ultimately happen. And so you just have to constantly build them, rebuild them, revisit them. It's like feeding your soul or just feeding yourself good food, right? You know that you need to do this often. And you need to rejuvenate. And I think partnerships work the same. They need to be nurtured. And if they are based on bringing people together where there are power differentials amongst those sets of folks, or there's already potential mistrust, you got to do the work. And you got to do that consistently, no matter what plan you put down on page. Because and especially for those who then end up being the representative of a larger body, you may not want to be that representative, but people might look at you as representing diversity or some set of entities. So, it is definitely going to take time. We have another question, and I think we probably only have a few moments for this, but it probably will be very applicable, I think, to both projects both of you have been leading and ones that you're probably interested in creating in the future. What do you see as that current process of grant making and reviewing and bringing things together that might need to change to enable greater inclusion and culture change? I think there's questions around compromise of rigor and integrity and brilliance, but I think there is this bigger question that is really about how to do this work purposefully, and what may be some of the ways that we can do stuff differently, even at that earliest stage of starting to put the stuff on paper, and starting to package things up. So Yvette, maybe you might kick us off this time.
Yeah, and I'm putting on a hat now as a former program officer for the National Science Foundation and also a long-term reviewer with them. And I'll speak from the review process itself. I think NSF has one of the best review processes I've seen in terms of bringing in reviewers and having the discussions to make recommendations. Where I think the process could be strengthened is while agencies, and I'm saying NSF because again, that's the space I've been in, but other agencies as well, when they train panelists or educate panelists or prepare panelists for reviews, there's a lot of talk about implicit bias, which is good, but there is still a lot of explicit, very overt bias that occurs. I know I've been in panel meetings where I've had to just completely shut down very overt biases that were impacting the conversations. And the challenge is when you have that voice that is so loud or so powerful in the room, sometimes that can derail a whole proposal review. Sure. And so I think one of the challenges that I would like to extend to NSF and other funding agencies is don't only focus on implicit bias, focus on explicit bias, and have program officers. There are a lot of program officers that just kind of sit like a fly on the wall in the room. And we have to be able to speak up and challenge people and call it in the moment when it occurs so that we can not have that adversely impact the process.
I will just note quickly two things that UKRI has done, and probably in one instance we'll definitely need to scale up and scale it out. But one thing is narrative CVs, and there are other funders around the world who also are moving toward a narrative CV, so away from journal metrics and various other things, and allowing people to capture their own truth of what the work is that they're doing, and how they put things together. And I think that is a really powerful space moving forward. I think the second thing is the point you just raised, Yvette, which is how to empower folks, no matter where they're at, to be able to challenge. And that's across the board. That's from a research office to challenge, all the way at an institution, all the way through to that challenge coming from a panel with a funder. And we need to be able to see professional services as playing a key role in all of this moving forward. Iyiola, your thoughts?
So, I mean, I would just absolutely agree with Yvette on that. The processes I've been involved in UKRI process as well, so I can speak from a bit of a position of experience. And I've seen the rigor of those review processes. They are very, very time consuming, goes through many different levels. And I think we can do more of both implicit and explicit bias. And I think one thing we can also do more on is thinking more strategically about how we do it, how we do encourage and recognize the inclusion of EDI goals in research projects, because that can be quite a complicated thing to do. And I think we need to give more guidance on how that can effectively be included in proposals. But I've just seen one question. I know Yvette is keen to answer this as well, and it's to do with pain. And we talked about anger. Sorry, Karen, I'm kind of jumping ahead.
No, that was the next part. So you just keep rolling.
We talked about, we talked about anger, but pain is so much different, isn't it? Because pain is the feeling that drains, that makes you unable to even speak your truth, that numbs you to even perhaps feeling your truth. And it's such a truism that there is a lot of pain in the sector, especially when you are knocked back and you are overlooked and you see other people moving ahead.
Yep.
How do you overcome that pain? In a way, you have to just steel up and step beyond it, because at present the sector isn't really geared up to even recognize or that pain, let alone respond to it. So in a way, it's about saying, right, I've gotten to, I run. And whenever I see a hill, I think, oh, God, I'll just get to the top of this hill and then I'll stop. And I get to the top and I think, what's the point in stopping now? I've already done all the hard work. I may as well just enjoy running down it. So you keep running. You get to that top of the hill, you celebrate, get into the top of that hill, and then you say, right, now I'm going to keep going, because why should I stop? Getting to the top of the hill is the goal. So now just recover, heal, and keep going.
Excellent. Yvette.
Yeah. And I wanted to answer this question in particular because this sounds like my story. When at my first university, I experienced roadblocks when I went up for promotion, just completely inexplicable. I had to fight for it. I ultimately got it. But in the middle of the fight, I felt like I was just so downtrodden. I knew my purpose in life was to be in academia. But at that point, I took interviews and I was poised to just walk away from academia. I got a job offer, but didn't get the salary I wanted. So I said, well, I'll stick around. But ultimately, I fought until I got my promotion and everything. And then I left. And so sometimes the answer, and I don't know what the situation is in Nigeria where you are for the person who answered this question, but sometimes going to another place, and in my case, it's looked on paper like a step back, because I went from a tenured, at that point, associate professor position to a non-tenured track senior lecturer position. But I was healthy, I was whole, I was happy, I was fulfilled, I got more money, and my career has taken off on a trajectory that I couldn't even imagine before. So the big thing, just like Iyiola said, is to take care of self, and then take a look at what your options are. And sometimes the option is to just find somewhere better. And in my case, like I said, what looked to most people like a step back ended up being a step up. And I don't regret my path at all. So I just want to encourage you.
No, thank you both for, I think, the contributions there. And we are out of time, but I would just reinforce, I think, your message to the person who's raised that last question. If I could just give a little bit of advice, it's find your co-conspirators, find the other people who have other sets of stories, find the ways in the path, try to understand what is motivating you. Don't try to model yourself after some, I don't know, fantasy story or fantasy ideal of what you think a career looks like, and blaze your own path as much as you ultimately can. I've taken inspiration with the fact that there have been 3 amazing, and I'm putting myself in that camp, Black women who have been able to lead this session from various different places and perspectives moving forward, without making a big deal about the fact that there were 3 of us doing the work, and doing it lots of different things, as well as working in inequality, diversity, and inclusion. You know, we find our ways, right? I will just acknowledge the work, and that's how we started this at the beginning, was the work that it takes to both do this work from EDI, but also just the work it takes to do just research and innovation and engaging with each other. Please take care of yourselves. Please take care of each other. And I think more importantly, try to take the time to listen. And I think hopefully you feel a bit inspired. There has been information that's been added into the chat about our next session, and when that will be. Any just final thoughts, Yvette and Iyiola, before we say goodbye to our guests?
I just want to thank you again for having me a part of this, and kudos to everybody on this journey. Just keep up the good work, and we'll get there.
Exactly.
Amen to that. That's all. I just want to echo that. Absolutely. Keep on with the journey. Don't give up. We're all rooting for you.
Exactly. And on that note, please have a fabulous rest of the day or evening wherever you are. And hopefully you can listen to this recording. I know that will be available into the future, and get inspiration, as well as hopefully, I don't know, some energy and some joy, because look how much we're smiling as we're continuing to do the work. Take care, everyone.